r/AskReddit. Serious redditors who spend a lot of time in the wilderness, what is the creepiest thing you have ever experienced out there? In the Cairngorms 2 weeks ago, the wind was reported over 100 kilometers per hour. We were in our tent for 17:30. At about 1900 hours I heard a calm female voice say hello. Hello, are you okay? I nudge the guys, ask them if they heard it. They say it's the wind. There we all hear an engine in the distance. We all heard it. We were at Loch Etchichan, which is very remote, no roads, only accessible by foot. The snow was very deep that day and it was close to a whiteout. We look around but find nothing, no tracks, etc. But whatever it was, we heard it through the howling wind, so it had to be close. We weren't too creeped out, but we are still confused. More just terrifying than creepy. Every year I go out to the Rockies to go climbing and hiking. To minimize the weight of my backpack I use a hammock instead of a traditional tent. Plus sometimes it's easier to find trees than flat ground. I definitely feel more exposed, but that was never an issue until now. I'm taking a nap in the afternoon, and in my sleep haze I hear something rustling around. I figure it's one of my friends getting ready, so I roll over to see what the plan is. But instead of one of my buddies I have a brown bear not more than 2 feet away staring straight at me. I can't even remember how I felt in that instant. I just reacted and hollered and clapped my hands and it quickly left. Needless to say I was wide awake after that. Just to have something that potentially dangerous creep up on you when you are asleep is freaking terrifying. And I had 2 more weeks of the trip to go sleeping in that hammock. In Ontario we've started having issues with cougars in the area since a few years back. My dad hunts, and one day I decided to go keep him company since his usual hunting buddy was sick. We were just sitting in a tree stand for a few hours. It was maybe 5 AM when, in the distance, we saw a cougar just minding its own business. There had been an attack recently, so we were fairly edgy. Suddenly, the wind changed directions and carried out scent directly to the cougar. The normal reaction from animals, even predators, when they detect a human is to run. But this one immediately started walking towards us, following our scent. My dad ended up firing a warning shot and it left. I'm not sure whether it was actually stalking us or just didn't know the scent. Edit. Woke up to a lot of PMs and a couple comments wondering where in Ontario. It was in southwestern Ontario, right near the border of Huron County and Perth County. This happened 5 or 6 years ago when the deer population was really bad in our area, so it's assumed that this attracted the cougars, although some suspect MNR actually released them around this time. I was out exploring in the woods in upstate New York. I was crossing a junior gorge, and there was this really pretty 20-foot waterfall, so I climbed up around it. At the top the water ran flat for a dozen yards or so, and then it bent, and was a gorge again. The first thing I saw was the altar in the middle of the stream. It was about 3 by 5 feet and about 4 feet high, made out of flat stones. In amongst the stones were scattered bottles of liquor, not all empty. Also some knives, of course. On one side of the stream was a cliff, on the other was a small bank, and then a cliff. I must have spent 5 minutes scanning my surroundings as quietly as possible before investigating more. On the bank there were seats and stout walls made out of flat stones. Scattered around were things like shirts, cloth, a machete, and the occasional saw and rope. When I was on the bank, I realized that where the stream bent, it was about 5 feet below the level of the bank, so someone could easily be there, or just around the bend in the gorge. I had no way of knowing. So I scurried back down the waterfall and ran home, right? No, because I'm the type of person who would die in a horror movie. I'd been making no noise, so I crept up to the bend in the stream where the bank dropped off. It was a Ringwraith Hobbit situation, except I was the one crapping my pants. I was now able to peek up the gorge, so I did for a while, to make sure no one was there. I slowly leaned over the edge of the bank, and then suddenly jumped down to the edge of the stream, because I couldn't handle the suspense I had created for myself. No one was there, but it was a great place to hide. So I slowly made my way up the gorge, stopping every now and then to scan the ridges and look behind me. I've been back around that area about a dozen times, but I've only found that place a few times. I haven't gone back into the gorge I found it in though. A friend and I were hitchhiking around the south of France and camping anywhere we could find a spot to put out leg tent. For a while, she would be really uneasy and be unable to sleep, as I think the sounds of cars and civilization in the distance made her worry that someone might see us. I knew that they were way further away than they sounded to us at night and was unfazed by it all. Usually she'd sleep badly and be shocked and slightly irritated by the fact that I could just switch off and go to sleep. One night, we were struggling to find somewhere to camp before sunset. We had ended up really in the middle of nowhere. We came to what looked like some dense woods with possibly a bit of a clearing further in, and decided to take our chances. I had to fight and hack through a lot of ferns that were taller than me to get to this clearing, and honestly started to regret it, with this sudden feeling hitting me that we should turn back. I actually stopped what I was doing, stopped moving and looked at her ready to say no, let's go back. But she was looking at me to keep going, and I felt like I had to provide us somewhere to sleep. I think she was used to me unfalteringly doing whatever had to be done. I had no real reason as to why I didn't want to continue, and at this point we didn't really have another choice, to be honest. We got to this clearing. It was actually kind of swampy, wet and very uncomfortable, but it had to do. I felt so uneasy. I lit a load of candles outside our tent, rare for me, but I really wanted more light, and drank some beers to try and feel better. We both started getting really grumpy with each other and had an argument. I've never seen her so mad at me before. It wasn't like she could just walk out into the woods away from me to cool off though, so she laid next to me in the tent talking bad about me into her diary. Since then she laughs about how unreasonably angry she was that night and how she was writing such angry stuff about me. We eventually laid down to sleep. I couldn't. There was this weird sound. I didn't mention it for a while because I didn't want to scare her, but eventually asked if she heard anything. She said she didn't, and I didn't elaborate or push it. It was like unintelligible whispering all around us, everywhere, and it sounded like something was moving around directly underneath my head, not like leaves rustling, but like everything moving, creaking and tapping and rustling, but not like leaves rustling. And I couldn't feel anything moving, but I figured that for something to be moving enough for it to be that loud, I surely would have felt it. I kept piling clothes beneath my head to block it out, as I though it was probably some insects under the tent, but the sound didn't sound any less loud or clear. I barely slept at all that night. The sounds wouldn't go, and I felt sick with anxiety. The next morning I made us pack up and get out in a hurry. I didn't really talk to her about it because I didn't want to scare her or make her worry, and I was just glad she'd managed to sleep for once. But that was one of the biggest nope feelings I'd had in a long time. That whole place felt wrong. There were a load of ants on the ground under our tent, so I wonder if we'd been on a nest. But the sounds were very specific and all around us. To cap it all off, we were idiots for sleeping somewhere so swampy and left very maybe mosquito bitten. In hindsight, a lot of the decisions we made on that trip were idiotic, but whatever. TL. Doctor, wild camping in a swampy patch in the south of France. Horrible feeling of nope and eerie sounds. This isn't necessarily something scary, but definitely made me never want to go back. Growing up in a rural town we didn't have too much to do. At the age of 14 most weekends I'd spend exploring the outsides of town with a friend of mine. The outsides of town were mostly all typical Australian bushland, with the exception of a few large untamed fields. One day a friend and I were following a river just down to the point of it being new territory for us. This was in noon by the way, and the bush ahead seemed a lot more dense and darker than what we'd expect. We still kept walking, but just before getting to the opening to it, we both simultaneously stopped in our tracks. I had a feeling come over me of being extremely uneasy and anxiety ridden. We both looked at each other and knew we both felt the exact same thing. With little talk we turned around and headed back hurriedly. As stated, not necessarily scary. I did however find it really eerie how both of us at the same time had the feeling something was off, but couldn't pinpoint one thing. Almost as if we had stepped over a line of sorts. I don't know about wilderness, but when Pokemon Go first came out, I went walking around my neighborhood alone in the dark. We often get coyotes in the neighborhood. Anyways, I'm walking around, about halfway across the neighborhood, when I start hearing an animal running up from behind me. I turn around, see 2 pairs of glowing eyes coming towards me, and feel my heart drop. 100% convinced I'm about to be mauled by coyotes. Scariest moment of my life. Thank you for watching. Like the video and leave a comment if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel, follow on Twitter, and join the Discord and subreddit so you never miss a new video.